Well, good morning. Hello, Tina. It's great to see you this morning.
And
Uh,
you too?
it's good to be able to talk together again. I hope that those who are going to join us online will interact a bit and do leave a comment if you can. This is of course going out on Facebook and also onto the YouTube channel. So to be watched afterwards as well. So yeah, we love people engaging in these kind of discussions. We're on key 41 out of 52 keys.
Oh, I tell a lie. I haven't changed the key. It's key 42.
Oh, it's key
So
42. Ah,
that's even better, isn't it?
better, yes. Yeah, there's a good bit of psychology going on there.
There you go. I've changed that.
So we're 10 away from the from our 52 kingdom breakthrough keys. We've been talking. We They cover a lot of ground. Um, uh, a main focus is on financial breakthrough and challenges around that.
Yes.
But these principles, don't they, Tina, kind of all do have wider implications for how to live as disciples of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of think. Let's think narrowly and widely as well. And so today we're going to be talking about breaking spiritual atmospheres. And, so I guess, Tina, you're going to be talking about constraints and breaking through constraints and things like that. So fire away, take us into some thoughts around this.
Yes, I think I am going to be speaking about breaking constraints, but I'm looking at it through a more positive lens of what we do rather than what we don't do.
Yeah.
And so I want to read a verse from the Old Testament. I think it's in 2 Chronicles. And for some reason, I didn't put the reference on it, but I'll read it to you and find the reference later. I'll put it in the spiel underneath. Indeed, it came to pass when the trumpeters and singers were as one to make sound to be heard in praising and thanking the Lord. And when they lifted up their voice with the trumpets and the cymbals and instruments of music and praised the Lord, saying, For he is good, for his mercy endures forever, that the house of the Lord was filled with a cloud, so that the priests could not continue ministering because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house. You know, we can change atmospheres as believers. You know, the atmosphere of our nation, the atmosphere of our culture, the atmosphere of our community, the atmosphere of our household, the atmosphere of our church. We can all change those atmospheres because we've been given that authority. We see it in the Old Testament, we see it in the New Testament. And as you can see, one of the ways that we can do it is to focus on the Lord in thanksgiving and praise, worshipping Him, so much so that actually God, who loves to inhabit the praises of His people, comes down and changes the atmosphere just by turning up. He's a bit like someone who kind of comes to a party who's not invited. But he is invited. We want him to be centre stage, really. But there are other examples in the Bible. As we remember, Paul and Silas prayed in the middle of the night and they sang songs of praise to God. And while all the other prisoners were listening, they to their worship, they're having a little praise party there. There was a great earthquake, and the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's chains were loosed. That's the power of praise. That's
Mm.
the power of praise. And that's one of the primary ways of changing atmosphere. Because what does praise do? Is it helps us to focus on God, who He is, and His name and His power can then come and inhabit us as we speak those words of truth about who He is again and again through songs. I was preparing for this. I had I had various songs going through my mind, and one of them was an old Graham Kendrick one. We'll walk the land with hearts on fire, and every step will be a prayer. Hope is rising, new day dawning, sound of singing fills the air, etc. And then it talks about let the flame burn brighter in the heart of the darkness, turning night to glorious day. We get to do that with our mouths. Isn't it
Yeah.
exciting?
Yeah.
It really is. So, no matter what situation we find ourselves in terms of, challenges, we may have healing challenges, provision challenges. There might be all kinds of trauma going on. We get to change the atmosphere by speaking words of faith. Yes, we've looked at that, but also belief in God and his omnipotence, his great power, and really his ability to change our situation just through praise and worship. So I was also reminded of Isaiah 61 verse 3, that where Jesus says, no, in the New Testament Jesus said it, he reiterated it, but of course Isaiah said it in the Old Testament, bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. Bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. The word bestow, I looked it up in the Hebrew, and it means to appoint, to lay violently. I mean, just imagine, it's yours. To direct, to change, to commit, convey, to heap up on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. I mean, how exciting. How exciting is that? Excuse me. I get all excited now. I haven't had enough to drink yet this morning, so. And I was also reminded as I was praying about the verse, and it may seem like it's not related, but it is. Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. Now, we always assume that means our kids. The word there in the Hebrew actually means child, servant, or young ones. Train up the young ones in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. We need those of us who are older. Come on, oldies. Those of us who are kind of near 60 or perhaps just past 60 or even further, who are getting older, or you might say middle-aged if you're like me, a believer that we can live up to 120 years because that's what God said our limit would be. So those of us who are older should be training the younger ones how they should live, how they should really take hold of these negative spiritual atmospheres and break them. And many people who are young in faith, they're not training for reigning. We're not training them for reigning. That's our responsibility. Those of us who lead churches, parachurch organizations, ministries, we should be training up the young. We should be modeling changing spiritual atmospheres, not defeat. Oh, I've had a cancer diagnosis. Oh, I've lost all my money. Oh, this and all these bad news. We get to be bearers. Are we not bearers of good news? That's what the word gospel means. It's good news. We're always good news bearers. You can't give a believer bad news to go and convey, because it ultimately all is for good news.
Yeah.
Even Jonah. Sorry, go on. I'm getting excited. Go for
Well,
it, Mark.
I know you're getting very excited. It's great. It's great. But bring this down into where this lands around financial, around provision,
Yeah.
around those kind of things, which I guess you'll be. Well, I won't put words into your mouth, but just bring it into.
So, when I look at my bank account and there's nothing in it, and I've got bills, usually that's a regular basis, breathing down my neck, and most of my bills are much higher than most people's bills. And they're breathing down my neck. I could focus on the problem, or I could focus on the Lord and his provision and on his goodness and what he's done. And I train my thoughts, I train my mind on the goodness of God, and all the scriptures really that go with it. We are to know the goodness of God in the land of the living. And God is good. We know that. Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom," and all these other things like food, like what you wear, where you live, all that kind of stuff, those things will be added to you, but seek first the kingdom is what he was saying. So we need to get our priorities right first. And I think that's one of the things that praise and worship tends to do. It focuses on God and it kind of puts us a bit on the spiritual operating table.
Yeah.
So that as we're praising and worshiping, God can tweak those things in our heart that need to be tweaked. He can rewire things in our minds that need to be rewired, where we're focusing on how big the mountain is. Jesus said, you can tell a mountain, to move and it'll move if you believe in your heart and confess with your lips. Well, guess what? We've got to get ourselves into that place. And if we can't get ourselves into that place, we're not going to be able to break those atmospheres, because we have to know that God has given us not only promises, he's given us a mandate. Jesus said, behold, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and no thing shall by any means harm you. One day I was praying and feeling woe is me because of the bills coming in and the things that needed to be paid. And the Lord said to me quite clearly, he said, the problem isn't at my end. He said, you need to rebuke the enemy daily. He said, daily. Every time you get up, give him a thrashing with your mouth, in other words. Rebuke him because he is stealing, because you're letting him. And so that's one of the things, we have authority to rebuke the enemy. In the Old Testament, they didn't quite get their head around that. And, but in the New Testament, Jesus commissioned his disciples and said, he's under your feet. You have the power to trample demons and all the power of the enemy, it says in that verse, and nothing shall by any means harm you. And so we need to recognize our authority. We need to recognize who we are, that we're God's children and we're Jesus's followers. We follow in his footsteps. And if he had to pray for provision and give us this day our daily bread, was one of the phrases that Jesus gave his disciples when they said, Lord, teach us how to pray. We're to ask God for our daily bread. And when we don't get it, the issue isn't at God's end. The issue is that we're being stolen from. And so one of the prayers that we pray is we don't just rebuke the enemy daily, is we declare you need to pay 7 times what you've stolen and what you've delayed. What you've stolen and delayed, it needs to come back to us because it belongs to us. And we know our authority and we don't give up. And so we have to get better at laying hold, back to that word bestow, in Isaiah 61:3, to bestow on them a crown of beauty. If we're going to be bestowing blessings, we need to lay violently, as the word says. We need to take what's ours violently. It belongs to us because it's our inheritance as God's children. And so oftentimes, people will say, if God gives me this, then I can give that. And I get that, but we start from where we are. What has God given you? Have you given out of that? Have you given him the first fruits? And if not, why not? And, address those things and give, and God will outgive you. He will outgive you. But we need to start with what we've got. Even the widow who was starving was encouraged to give away her last meal, the one that she was to share with her son. I mean, what parent would share the meal for her and her child, with a visiting preacher or prophet or whatever? Not many. And yet that was the word that Elijah had been given, and she did it. And because of that, she did what the Lord said. She broke an atmosphere over her and her household because there was a famine in the land.
Yeah.
And we can break these things over our household. And one of the things, people will say to me, I think I touched on this last time, Christmas, it's a very expensive time. I can't afford to give. Don't buy into that. Give, but give as the Lord directs. Don't give for the sake of giving. Always give as the Lord directs, and give as much as he says. And sometimes what he will say will surprise you, because sometimes it may be more than you think you can afford. But he won't ask you to give into debt. Let me just be clear on that. If you are already in debt, that's a different matter. All right. You need to be prayerful and careful over your giving when you're in debt. But you
Yeah.
do still need to prioritize God. You know, I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it here again in case somebody didn't watch that particular talk. You know, when I was in debt many years ago, with my first marriage, we had got debt and we couldn't get out of it. And we'd heard a talk on tithing, and I wanted to give a tithe, to give 10%. And my husband said, well, I want to pay off the debt. And we both agreed that was the important thing to do because it's scriptural. So we decided we'll give half to the Lord, half to the debt. When the debt's paid off, it's all to the Lord. And you know what? Within 4 months, we were giving 20% of our income away, and we were out of debt. And so, you know, we break these atmospheres by doing the opposite. Somebody sent me a message, I think I alluded to it last time, saying, I find October a very hard month. I'm not going to do spiritual stuff this month. I'm just going to, you know, focus on other stuff because it's a really depressing month. And I said, it's a depressing month. You need to do the opposite. He said, I like your attitude. I thought, great, follow it. If you like it that much, follow it. Because that's how we break the attitude. Imagine the entire church having that attitude.
Yeah.
What a difference it would make to our community, our family, our culture, our nation. It would be huge. So,
and I wonder if anybody watching and joining in with this, listening to it afterwards, you know, just check in on spiritual atmosphere. You know, what you may be finding that you're laboring under, that you're experiencing at the moment, and ask the question, what are the spiritual resources that I bring to this? What's the kingdom advance that I make?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And,
iron sharpens iron. We're to encourage each other, to strengthen each other. And you know, one of the things I've found, my mum's memory is not as good as it was, but it's much better than most people are expecting. Put it that way. And in the car, I put on worship music. And when I've got the worship music on, she sings it almost verbatim, word for word. You know, she's joining in, and some of these songs are very simple, Keith Green songs, all kinds of things, but she'll join in with it. And she's speaking positive things over her own life and over the atmosphere as we're driving and things like that. You know, there are such simple things we can do to change the atmosphere around us. And not just about having a positive attitude, but having a prayerful and a biblical attitude. And those things make a huge difference to the spiritual atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's been a really rich conversation. Thank you, Tina. As I've said at the beginning, everyone, if you want to join in with the conversations, do leave testimony, just your thoughts, your reflections. We love to hear from you, and we look forward to another of our keys that we're going to be recording shortly, and so look out for that, and do look back on the ones that are already online on the YouTube channel.
Indeed.
Great.
Blessings, everybody.
All right.
See you shortly, Mark. Bye.